When Kim and I realized what was in Canada, it literally gave us the inspiration to leave our jobs and start this business because we knew that more hospitals had to know about it.
A lot of times when you have agency nurses, that come in and are there, for 13 weeks and then head off to another assignment, you can't really build community.
These nurses are so very grateful for the opportunity that you're giving them. It literally impacts the attitude they bring to work.
Our retention with our hospitals is sitting at 97%. That's unheard of in our industry. And it's because, they are looking to stay.
And it is about building relationships because I do believe that culture is the new currency when it comes to nurse recruitment. There's a moment when everything changes.
When a nurse leaves behind what's familiar to answer a deeper calling.
And when a leader makes a decision that doesn't just impact the numbers,
but people, teams, and lives.
Welcome to the Culture Shifters,
where nurses and leaders transform the culture of care.
These are the stories of those who crossed borders,
challenged the system,
and chose to lead differently.
Because changing healthcare starts from within.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Culture Shifters. I am one of your hosts, Lisha Crytzer, co-founder of NurseMatch.
And I'm also a host, Kim England, co-founder of NurseMatch.
Thank you so much for joining us. We are so excited to have you here. Culture Shifters is all about our nurses and our healthcare leaders transforming the culture of care. And today we are going to be talking to our hospital clients or U.S. hospitals that are listening in. For those of you that don't know, we have two clients that we serve. One of them, of course, are the nurses that we support throughout Canada and getting them into their ideal career here in the United States. And then our other client, of course, are the U.S. hospitals across the United States that we get to work with day in and day out and sending them our wonderful nurses. So I think today what our goal is to talk openly about why hospitals call us and what they learn that's a little bit different about what we do. We are a niche company. If we haven't already said it, we've been doing this for 25 years. Like Kim says, we started when we were 5, right? But no, in all sincerity, we love when we get to talk to a client that has never tapped into this market.
Yes.
And it is a market that we discovered when we were working in the hospital many, many years ago. I sent my little recruitment team off to Canada and they came back and they were so excited. And when Kim and I realized what was in Canada, it literally gave us the inspiration to leave our jobs and start this business because we knew that more hospitals had to know about it. And we are so excited to share the ins and outs and give you a really good foundational overview of what Canadian nurse recruitment can do for your hospital if that's something that you're interested in, and talk to you about the pros and the cons. It's not for everyone, but I think that hopefully by the end of the show, Kim, people should have a really good understanding not only about Canadian nurse recruitment, but about NurseMatch and kind of how we feel like we do business a little bit differently.
Yes, I completely agree.
All right. Well, Kim has actually been the one that from the beginning has been on the sales side and building all these wonderful relationships with our hospitals that we've been able to work with throughout the years. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit right now in the beginning, just to give you an initial overview, just in case you're not really clear on Canadian recruitment. So I don't think it's fair, Kim, to put us in the bucket of international nurse recruitment. Would you agree with that?
Yes.
Okay. So when we're talking to hospitals and if you're involved in international nurse recruitment, you understand that's a very big, complex lift. And I understand it's very necessary. There's programs that are very successful, and that's amazing. Canadian nurse recruitment, I think, is a hybrid. I don't know.
Right.
They are next door, so it's not like that big of a leap. And then, from an immigration standpoint, the simplicity is so beautiful.
Yes, they can come over on the TN visa. Very simple.
So why don't you talk to our listeners about the TN visa and how that impacts a hospital?
Absolutely. So the TN visa, is a trade NAFTA agreement between the U.S. and Mexico and the U.S. and Canada. And it's been in place for many, many years. And the name has changed, but I feel like the nurses, and we still call it the TN visa, but it's a simple process because all they have to do, is go to the border and they submit their documents, they stamp their passport, and it's good for 3 years and it's indefinite. So that's the beauty of being able to recruit Canadian nurses, is just that simplicity.
What about the cost?
The cost is very minimal. It's $50. And so that is something that you're not going to have to spend, thousands and thousands of dollars to renew either. So it's very cost effective.
Right. So I hear that the TN visa is temporary, and you said it was good for 3 years.
Right.
So after those 3 years, let's talk about what the options are.
Yeah. So at that time, you and the nurse can decide if they want to, renew the TN visa. But what a lot of our nurses choose to do or like to do is they want to, set down roots with your hospital and then also the community. So at that time, if it's agreeable to your organization and to the nurse, then all they have to do is do an adjustment of status and then start working towards that green card. And we always, talk about green card is great for retention, because it, depending on the country that the nurse was born in, it's either, going to take them 3 years or, there's some countries that it can take 10 plus years. So definitely from a retention side of things, the green card is very valuable, but it's also valuable to the nurse because they know that you truly want them and they want to be a part of your health system, to grow and to learn and to be part of the community. So it's a beautiful thing, whether you want to do the TN visa or the green card.
Absolutely. And I would say, too, from a complexity standpoint, as far as, onboarding a program like Canadian Nurse Recruitment is also looks very different than working with, international nurses from all over the world. So first of all, the infrastructure that it takes to onboard the Canadian nurse versus somebody that's from another country looks very different. And I would say the biggest difference is going to be the upskilling, because when nurses are in Canada, working in Canada, yes, we have very different healthcare systems, but we're also, all westernized, the westernized culture. So there's so many similarities that prepares them and sets them up for wonderful success here in the United States.
Yes, we get that all the time, from our hospitals that these nurses, are ready to go. It takes, like you said, minimal upskilling. And, for hospitals that are, either expanding or, filling different units, to have a nurse that is ready to go and you don't have to spend a lot of time training can be, very crucial for those different units. So again, over and over, I hear, the minimal upskilling is what makes them so attractive to Canadian RNs.
Absolutely. And we'll get kind of into those reasons, like why, the calls that you get from clients, why are they calling you? But before we get to that, I think the biggest unexpected advantage to Canadian Nurse Recruitment, and this is probably actually across the board with international nurses, I would have to say, but the attitude of gratitude. These nurses are so very grateful for the opportunity that you're giving them, and it literally impacts the attitude they bring to work, their commitment to show up every day. They really do want to do the very, very best job. And I think that, to me, is how our nurses stand out so significantly. It's just their heart. They're there to serve, and they're so thankful for the opportunity to work for, our hospitals. And I think that is probably really refreshing for a lot of our clients.
Yes, I would agree. And we have so many stories. And I know, that's what this podcast is all about. You're going to hear stories of the nurses and their journeys to get here. But it's such a blessing to work with these nurses, just like you said, because they are so grateful and they're so excited, to join your organization and learn and grow, not only in their career, but to set down roots within your community.
Absolutely. So let's talk about maybe 2 or 3 reasons. What type of calls do you get from hospitals of why they're wanting to possibly consider hiring Canadian nurses?
Yeah, I would, definitely say probably workforce stability or long-term staff. A lot of times when you have agency nurses, that come in and are there, for 13 weeks and then head off to another assignment, you can't really build community. And I think that community and culture right now is such a big word in our industry that hospitals, are definitely working on and wanting to build that community and that culture. And so these nurses, that's what they're looking for. They're not looking for travel assignments. They're looking for permanent placement.
On average, what would you say is the retention rate of these nurses?
Oh, wow. That is something I'm so proud of with NurseMatch is right now our retention with our hospitals is sitting at 97%. That's unheard of in our industry. And it's because, they are looking to stay because when they're moving their families, they're not just looking for a travel assignment. They're looking to stay and to grow.
Absolutely. So what's another point that you want to discuss about?
Yeah, I would say hospital expansion. If your hospital, is looking to build a new tower, or if you're adding on, beds in a unit, this is definitely a pool of nurses while you're planning on, in the building phase to definitely look at because these are all the nurses that we place, are all experienced. We don't place new grads unless we have a hospital, that asks for us to bring some new grads on. But hospital expansion, and I think every hospital is expanding right now. So it's definitely a great pull outside of your local market.
Absolutely. I know you kind of already mentioned it, but even if you're not expanding, if you need access to depth and to experience, that's really where we shine. And I think our average year of experience right now is between 6 to 10 years of experience.
Yes.
So.
Yeah. And what our pool of nurses, looks like is when we're talking about experiences, we have a lot of nurses that are the empty nesters, and they are looking now that the kids are off to college and that they want to, go on to their next phase of their life. And so you're going to see a lot of experience in those empty nesters.
Absolutely. So before we move on to anything else that's not really specific to, interests and needs for hospitals, is there anything that you want to talk about that, sets a hospital up for success when they're ready to take on this kind of a project?
Yeah, absolutely. If you have any type of a training program that you're currently, using for your new grads or, help me with the word here, Lisha, that I'm trying to think of. Onboarding.
Yeah.
Then, you can definitely, and our team actually will help you, prepare to bring these nurses on because, it is important from day one that these nurses feel a part of your hospital and your organization. And so, we definitely want those clinical managers to be involved and to, be able to help these nurses feel part of the community.
Right. Absolutely. And I think, too, it's important to also address we'll back up just a little bit just to kind of give everyone a context. Before we did direct placement, we were actually in the business of offering events. So like career events, or we would bring nurses to a specific hospital. And it was great. It worked out really well. But where we found the biggest gap is when we would host these events, the hospitals were excited, the nurses were excited, offers were made, and then we would follow up and the drop-off rate was insane. It's like,
it was
what
huge.
is going on? And the missing piece that needed to be bridged was once that hospital makes an offer, somebody has to support that nurse until they land.
Exactly.
And that is really what changed our business significantly, is turning that around, and a few other things that we will, explore and discuss, through other episodes. But, when you take on a project like this, it's really important to make sure that you have somebody that is supporting that nurse, not just from a licensure, immigration, but where are they going to land? Do they have housing? Do they need to schools for their children? So it's a holistic approach to make sure that nothing has been left, because even though it is Canada, that seems like an easier move, it is still a big deal to move from, one country to another logistically. And not only that, you're changing healthcare systems. And so you're already nervous professionally. The last thing you want to leave up for, question is your day-to-day living. And you want to make sure that all of those things are buttoned down. And that is something that we don't expect hospitals to manage. I just don't think it's, they can, but I think it's nice when you work with somebody where it's in their wheelhouse and they take care of the entire process.
Right. Well, and that's what our team does such a good job, from getting them not only to your door, but we follow them for an entire year. And so, we'll check in, on that day one, just to make sure they found where they needed to go, and check in, at 1 week, then at 3 months, 6 months, 9 months, and 1 year. So I think that's what definitely sets NurseMatch apart from any other company, is that relationship piece. We, just don't drop them off at the door and leave. We're there for the, for the long haul, because it is important. And I do believe that's why our retention numbers are so high, is because we care, about our nurses. They become family. I think I've mentioned in other episodes, we constantly are getting pictures or text messages of how excited they are. But again, I feel like that's, the relation piece with NurseMatch, and then also with your hospital, because you're going to know, what's going on with these nurses at any given point of time.
Absolutely. So let's talk about how long it takes for a nurse to be eligible to come and work here. Like, if you decide like this is something for you, when can you start expecting nurses to arrive?
Yeah. Absolutely. A lot of it depends on the Board of Nursing, depending on, it's usually can be anywhere between 3 to 6 months is our average. But again, it's all driven by the Board of Nursing. But one thing that, our team is very hands-on. They're going to always, keep you in the loop on when that nurse is going to start, and, on which orientation that they are going to be at. But I would say roughly, it's always between 3 to 6 months.
Great. So that's just kind of high level overview of, Canadian recruitment and the advantages. I think I want to pivot, Kim, now a little bit into just kind of the current market and, and what's going on. We have seen, the market soften a little bit, especially, post COVID. Everyone's okay, this is where I'm going to be. Agency utilization is definitely way down. But with that, what are you still seeing right now?
I think, what we're seeing is the competition for experienced nurses has definitely intensified. And I feel like, Canada is definitely something you need to look at outside of your local market, because you are going to find experienced nurses.
Absolutely. That are ready to go.
Yes.
That they can get to you quickly and need minimal upskilling. So,
yes.
But with the market changes, I think what I love seeing and why it's works so well with us and how we're built as a company is really a lot of your leading hospitals have moved from chaotic staffing, just fill as many positions as you can get, very transactional, to more relational. And it is about building relationships, because I do believe that culture is a new currency when it comes to nurse recruitment.
Absolutely.
Nurses are looking for a culture. And I think that's why it's so important that as hospitals, when you're building out your talent profile, your pipelines, where you're going to be pulling from, that you become very selective when you do need to reach out for help. Where are those nurses coming from? You need to make sure that it is a culture fit and a culture match for your hospital. And that's one of the things I feel like NurseMatch, we get so into the details of our clients before we start recruiting. We know exactly, it's not just at a high level, but working directly one-on-one with those hiring managers to make sure that we can contribute to their culture. And I think that is one thing that, if hospitals can and really get focused on that and be real strategic in who they partner with, that is where recruitment is going right now. Aside from, a lot of the, technology stuff, it's still, relationships are now more important than ever. And the fact that, our business was actually, founded because of a relationship.
Yes.
And the fact that we saw a missing component in the traditional interview process. But I do think that is where NurseMatch, it's just a perfect fit for us. When you're looking to build culture with wonderful nurses that want to come and contribute and stay, then I think that, you'd be very, very pleased.
I would agree.
So any other discussion points, Kim, as far as what you think, some of the, major questions that hospitals are asking you right now?
Most questions is when can they start? And so, that's definitely something that I know, you guys needed these nurses yesterday, but, I would love to book a call and have a one-on-one conversation. And then we have some beautiful testimonials from our current clients that we can always share. And, I think what I want to mention is we become an extension of your team. It's always bittersweet when we end a project with a hospital because we become just a part of your team. But I think what is amazing too is, I have so many clients that, I'll hear from them again 3 to 4 years down the road when they have a new project or a new wing that they're building and need some experienced nurses. But again, I would, love to get on a call with you and just see what your needs are and see how we can partner.
Absolutely. Well, thank you guys so much for joining us today. We hope that you continue to listen in, especially when we get to the fun part. We will have clients joining us to tell their stories of transformation that's happened within their hospitals. And then you also get to hear stories from our nurses and the journeys that they've made to seek their dream here in the United States. So again, thank you so much for joining us this episode of The Culture Shifters.
Thank you for joining us on The Culture Shifters.
If this story resonated with you,
share it with someone who needs to hear it.
And if you're a nurse feeling called to something more,
we see you and we'd be honored to be a part of your journey.
And if you're a healthcare leader committed to stronger,
more sustainable culture, we'd love to connect.
You can learn more and continue the conversation with us at NurseMatch.com.
Until next time, keep showing up,
keep leading with purpose,
and keep shaping the culture of care.